Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us on this beautiful day in Connecticut. I think it goes without saying that everybody here this morning loves Connecticut, loves the beauty of our state, loves its environment. And we all want clean air, we want better communities, and we are not opposed to those issues. The question, however, is how do we get there? And what our government, the government of the people, by the people, and for the people is all about is representative government and choice. And who gets to make that choice? Is it actually the people of Connecticut, or is it the government itself, the bureaucrats of Connecticut? The unelected bureaucrats who are going to make the choice as to what our government is or is not going to do. Now, I think if you go across the state of Connecticut and ask anybody on Main Street, they will tell you that they believe in America and the virtues of America, which is the people get to decide. It's the people's choice. And that's what we're here to talk about this morning, is who's going to decide that choice that the people of our state have. We think that choice rests with the General Assembly. The administration believes it rests with the bureaucrats. There are too many hardworking, middle-class Connecticut families that are struggling under an economy that doesn't work for them, living hand-to-mouth and paycheck to paycheck. And yet the choice before us with regards to the prohibition on the EVs. In other words, the government wants to make every family start purchasing new EVs in 2035, which are more expensive to buy, more expensive to fix, and more expensive to insure. But that's the choice, is do we have to follow California, or can we have a different choice, a different alternative? What the administration would like to do is just state a goal, mandate the purchase of electric vehicles in 2035 with no plan to get there. No plan. Right now, our electric grid can't handle if every car were electric. We don't have the capacity. The industry says that we need a $2.4 billion investment, 14 new substations. DEP's plan does not tell us where those substations are going to go. And if I was a betting man, I'd bet my bottom dollar that they're not going to end up in the communities now purchasing electric vehicles in Lower Fairfield County. They'll probably end up in the environmental justice communities. But there's no plan to dissuade me that that's actually wrong. How many times have we heard promises only to find out that they aren't fulfilled? And this building is littered with broken promises by the majority. Everywhere from health care to the lottery's going to pay for education to even on point, where we have the Clean Air Act fund and fees that we pay for reduced emissions that were promised to go into these initiatives never make it. And it's been happening for decades. So to think that the administration can promise that by 2035 this is going to happen when the track record of the majority is anything but that. And then you look at what's happened just since this policy has been announced by the majority party. You take the president has basically said that there's no hydrogen hub for Connecticut or the Northeast. To Pura rejecting the electric industry's attempt to put money into the grid and charging stations, to as local as the city of Bridgeport, changing its zoning regulations to basically put the Park City Wind project on hold. All necessary if we're going to build more electric capacity, but yet the same individuals who are saying we'll get there and trust us are then working against themselves to help us get there. Instead, What we need to do is to follow what 32 other states have done and to look at what is already there in the EPA. The majority wants to believe that California is better for Connecticut than Connecticut. Nobody represents us in Sacramento. We don't have one representative from the state of Connecticut in Sacramento, but yet we have 7 representatives in the form of a Connecticut delegation in Washington. Who do we trust? I trust the people of Connecticut. The people of Connecticut are the ones that we need to hear from, that we need to trust, and their elected representatives are the ones who should be making this decision. I know, as an elder law attorney, one of the most difficult discussions I have with my clients is to ask them to not drive their car anymore. It is something that represents independence and freedom. From the moment we get our hands on the car keys at age 16, that represents our access to our community, freedom of movement throughout our area, and basically it is something every person, not only in the state of Connecticut, but in our great country, holds so near and dear to the heart. That when we say it's time to no longer have that, it's a difficult conversation. And that's why I think something so life-changing that's going to take our choice away needs to rightfully be decided by the General Assembly. The majority will tell us that this policy will not take the car away. Well, let me tell you something. You're still going to have an opportunity to buy a car, but it's only going to be an electric car. That limits choice. That reduces the options that are available to the people of Connecticut. And that is something that Americans and people in Connecticut are not accustomed to be told what you can and can't have the option to buy. So with us today, I also have State Representative, House Leader Vin Candelora, to also make some remarks.
Thank you and good morning. My colleagues are here today representing the individuals in the state of Connecticut that want choice. We're here for the single mother that's raising a family in the city, wondering how she's going to get a charging station hooked up on the street when she's forced to buy an electric vehicle from the state of Connecticut. We're here for the sole proprietor who does odd jobs around town in order to make a living in his pickup truck, and figuring out how he's going to be able to earn a living, limiting his travel to 100 miles per day because his truck can only charge and go that far. We're also here for the elderly couple who's on a fixed income, who are vibrant and going around their community and thinking that they now have to get rid of their 5-year-old vehicle and purchase a very expensive vehicle in order to figure out how they can continue to be mobile around the state of Connecticut and visit their friends and families on the holidays. Those are the questions that we are posing to the governor's office and to the department, to Commissioner Dykes, before we take this leap of faith and vote for electric vehicle mandates throughout the entire state of Connecticut. And those are the questions that continue to go unanswered. And a response of, let's pass these regulations, and if we need to delay them down the road, we can, is not an answer. Because once these regulations go in effect, people are going to start making decisions immediately for their future. I'm concerned about those businesses who every day are manufacturing product, and they need to move that product out of the state of Connecticut. What is the plan to get electric trucks into this state that can go less than 100 miles per day and move that product out of Connecticut? You know, we pride ourselves with our defense industry, but we are not putting forth a plan that is going to show how they continue to be viable if these regulations are passed. The governor's office doesn't want to talk about the $2.5 billion investment in our infrastructure plan that's going to immediately, once that's invested, it's going to cost $120 per month on everybody's electric bill just to pay for that infrastructure. They don't want to talk about the gas stations and the convenience stores that are going to see their traffic be reduced by 1/2 because people are not going to need to utilize a gas station any longer, and that customer pool will evaporate. They don't want to talk about the insurance rates that are going to increase for everybody, upward of 70% that we are seeing with electric vehicles. And so these are just some of the reasons of why we stand concerned and opposed to these regulations. We cannot impose such a mandate on our communities. We have an obligation to protect their choice. And finally, these are coming before the Regs Review Committee on November 28th. And we hear again that the committee is limited to looking at the legal sufficiency of these regulations. Last I saw, I thought it was the Attorney General that reviews that scope. And when you look at the statute, the Regs Review Committee is free to adopt, to approve, to disapprove, or reject without prejudice. So they full are within their discretion to take a pause on these regulations and vote no. So we can have the conversation in the legislature of, do we want California or do we want to follow the vast majority of states in this country and go the federal route and protect our residents? Thank you.
Okay. At this point, I'd like to bring up some ranking members. First, from the Environment Committee, both Pat Callahan and Senator Steve Harding.
No pun intended. Thank you, Senator Kelly. I want to thank Representative Candelora as well. I want to thank both the House and Senate Republican leadership for taking a stand on this issue and highlighting this issue. This is critically important, as Representative Candelora mentioned, to the vast majority of individuals in the state, to the middle-class individuals that comprise the majority of this state. This is going to be something when a middle-class family hears the words from a mechanic that you're going to have to get a new vehicle. Starting in 2035, their options are going to be nothing but electric. It is hard enough for middle-class families to find a way to afford a used carbon emission vehicle. Now you're going to tell them they're going to have to buy a brand new electric vehicle. Where are we going to come up with the funds to purchase those cars for middle-class families? That's number one. But number two, and Representative Callahan could speak with this as well, both him and myself in the Environment Committee has asked the Deep Commissioner multiple times in terms of a plan for this. And I would say that the governor resoundingly got reelected in this state on promoting pragmatic policy. This is the antithesis to a pragmatic policy. There is no answers to any questions. If you talk with people in the trucking industry, in order to get a battery the size that they would need to get the capacity in terms of travel on one of these large trucks, there is no suspension bridge in the entire United States of America that could take on the weight of that truck. We have not heard one answer as to the solution to this. So again, I would ask the governor's office in terms of this is the governor's commissioner, the Deep Commissioner that he appointed, who is bringing these regulations to the Regulation Review Committee. I would ask the governor's office, come out and answer these questions. And if you can't, then this is obviously not a pragmatic policy, and this should be something where the governor's office should be openly saying, we need to pause this. And I think the way to pause it is the plan in which that it's been laid out by both Senator Kelly and Representative Candelora, in that we should be moving to a federal EPA standard. We have representation in Congress, we have representation in the United States Senate, where our constituents and ourselves can go and address these issues when it comes down to regulations regarding our emissions standards. And we have no representative in Sacramento. And so what is it saying to our constituents when we're promoting a policy where someone in Sacramento is creating something that fits the standard for California. We should be concerned about what works for the people of the state of Connecticut. And a plan here that would put us under the EPA standards is a plan that is conducive not only to Connecticut but to the entire country, and therefore our constituents would have representatives advocating for them. So it is in line with what is good governmental policy, and it also would again stand out and promote pragmatic policy. We're not saying that electric vehicles can't be a positive thing, but mandating by 2035 that all vehicles purchased in the state have to be electric powered, without any answers as to the electric capacity, without any answers as to how individuals are going to afford this, without any answers how our trucking industry is going to work in this state, is not good policy, and we should do something about this now. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harding. And just to add a couple things, I think everybody in this room today and anyone watching realizes one of their biggest bills is their electric bill. And as Representative Candelora mentioned, with a $2.5 billion price tag to try and make the grid have the capacity to do this will add even more to your monthly bill. Not to mention, if you have a heavy-duty truck that weighs considerably more, costs 4 times as much and has half the range and can't carry about a third less capacity, what's going to do to your grocery bills? People out there should be worried, because if this goes through, your electric bill goes up, your grocery bill goes up, and to what end? Is this going to really affect the environment in Connecticut that much? Everyone behind you here is concerned with the environment and clean air. And on the Environment Committee, we deal with it every day. But the problem is, right now, where's the generating capacity in Connecticut? It's fossil fuels. Ørsted just pulled out offshore wind. They pulled out of there because interest rates, there's no profit in it. So until we have a way to lower people's electric bills so they perhaps want to buy an electric vehicle, and as I said in meetings with DEP, if these are so great, why do you have to mandate them? And what are you going to do when there's a busy day in I-95 and you've got backups all the way down the entrance ramps to get into the rest areas to try and charge? What's it take everyone in the room, 3-5 minutes to gas up their car? And now you're going to sit for 40 minutes on a hot or a cold day with 3 little kids in the car? What are you going to do? It's just not feasible right now. We have a system, an electric grid right now where you have transformers outside your house. Those are meant to cool at night. You start plugging in electric vehicles, what happens to transformers? Poof. So then the towns are going to start limiting what streets can charge and what times. And part of their plan is if we all plug in our electric vehicles, they're going to borrow power back and forth from the battery packs in your cars. There is no plan in place here forcing the people of Connecticut into this very expensive option. I see it as a kind of a reverse Robin Hood, because we have to subsidize the vehicles, we have to subsidize the grid, and it's forcing our middle and lower class to bear the brunt of the cost. And until we have a real system where we can get cheap, clean electricity in Connecticut, you're simply trading tailpipe for smokestack. Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, now I'd like to bring up the ranking member from Energy and Technology, Representative Billy Buckby.
It's like a wider path coming through now. Good morning. I don't want to go through and say the same thing said, everything I agree with to this point. I want to elaborate on a couple of things. Senator Kelly mentioned something, too, about the people having some say. For me, I get about 12 to 15 to 1 from my constituents who are opposed to this to those who support this concept. Part of that's because there is no roadmap. We know where we want to go, but there's no roadmap to get there. Secondly, what Representative Candelora mentioned, you talk about the 100 miles for a truck. I represent a community that's the largest town in the state. It's over 60 square miles to get around New Milford. So, as Representative Callahan mentioned, when you talk about the rest stops all over, that's one thing. But now you talk about the rural communities and how much this is going to hit every one of those rural communities. And not even be able to get up and down your own town twice. So that's a concern. My bigger piece of this, we've heard from from the energy leadership as well as from the governor's office about the three-legged stool. Everybody remembers the three-legged stool, right? We talk about reliability and dependability of the grid, combined with a green grid and making that financially solvent for everyone. We're sitting on one leg here. And that might be the biggest problem. We don't have a grid that can support it. And fiscally, this number is already going through the roof. It's only getting higher. When you think about that piece of it, the infrastructure needs to be upgraded now. Imagine how much more that goes through it, right? How much more energy we have to push through it. We can't produce that much energy on the grid, and the system we have can't support it. So my question would be, how do we fix that stool from sitting on one leg? Because right now, I'm not sitting on that stool. I'm too big for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to have the Vice President, Dennis Lyons from DATCO.
Good morning. As you said, I'm here from DATCO Incorporated in New Britain, Connecticut. We're a passenger transportation provider with locations throughout New England. We operate 1,100 school buses in Connecticut and Rhode Island, and we've already begun the investment in electric technology there, where we feel it makes sense and it's doable. I oversee a portion of the business that operates largely charter bus service within Connecticut, within New England, taking Connecticut residents to events and locations here at home and throughout New England and the U.S. And we also, a big part of our business is bringing in tourists from throughout the U.S. and international to visit Connecticut, to visit New England. Our part of the business simply can't operate with the current mandate without a plan. There's been, we talk about ranges of 170 miles on a motor coach, a baggage capacity reduction of 70%. We're an industry that in the past 35 years has reduced diesel emissions by 98%. That's both 98% in terms of solid particulate matter in the air and 98% NOx emissions. You can wipe the tailpipe of one of our coaches with a handkerchief and it won't get dirty. Diesel is clean. That said, we're not opposed to alternatives, but we've got to look at alternatives, and any alternative that we seek to implement has got to be implemented with a plan, with a roadmap. And there simply isn't one today. Under this current plan, we can buy all the 2012 or older buses with dirtier diesel engines that we want in 24, in 25, and 26. We cannot buy a bus that we took delivery of last week with the cleanest diesel technology available. We will not be able to buy that bus in 24. We will not be able to buy that bus in 25 or 26. The engine manufacturers were told by the US EPA to be ready for 2027, and they've done that. And then because California, a state with different challenges, different environment, because they've decided to move that schedule ahead 3 years, Connecticut, by just adopting CARB standards, is going to have to follow that. And again, it can't be done. We're looking at a range of 170 miles. The last time one of our coaches was limited to a 170-mile trip was 1968, so we're going a little backwards. Again, our luggage capacity reduced by 70% because of the batteries. One of the speakers spoke about the impact on our infrastructure. The average automobile increases its weight by 800 to 900 pounds. With a motor coach, it's tenfold. It's 8,000 to 9,000 pounds additional weight on the coach. It takes us anywhere from 4.5 to 6 hours of charging to recharge that coach fully for just another 170 miles. I visited with a customer in Colorado last week that brings about 7,500 international visitors to New England every fall. They were being pushed by their marketing department. I was asked, could we provide electric motor coaches in 5 years? And I said, as long as you want to extend your 14-day tour to 21 days to see everything and tell them you can't bring your bags, we'd be able to do that. Otherwise, the answer is a flat no. It's just not possible in our industry to meet this emissions challenge with electric. The infrastructure isn't there when we charge a motor coach. We pull into the existing infrastructure in the Walmart Plaza or even a Tesla bank. The motor coach takes the entire bank up, so nobody can charge their car while we're charging our bus for 4.5 to 5 hours. We had a chance last year to utilize an electric motor coach from our manufacturer. We took it from Falmouth, Massachusetts to Newburgh, New York, a 9.5-hour journey. And it wasn't the Bourne Bridge that slowed us up. It was the charging in Connecticut. It's just not possible. We're open to hydrogen. We're open to electric if they come up with a better plan, but as it exists today, it doesn't work for us. In our school bus fleet, again, it's a valid option. The bus works for 2 to 3 hours in the morning, 2 to 3 hours in the afternoon. We can charge it all day. Our challenge there is we can't currently get the electricity from the grid into our yards because Eversource can't supply the components. We have 14 electric school buses in our fleet. We have 25 incoming this year. We don't have the charging infrastructure to support those additional 25 buses. In our motor coach fleet, again, it's just simply not an option. We're open to hydrogen. We think that would be a good option. At least gets us a 500-mile range, which is about a typical day on one of our tours. There's other options, but we've got to have a plan, and this mandate as it exists today simply does not give us that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Next, we have John Blair, the president of the Motor Transport Association of Connecticut. John.
Good morning, everybody, and I want to thank both the caucuses. They've been supported from day one on this issue. I'm John Blair, president of Motor Transport Association of Connecticut. I represent about 500 motor carriers. Why it's important for consumers to understand that when a cost is incurred by our industry, that gets passed on to you. It was spoken of earlier. So from the bed you slept in last night to the food in your fridge, that came by freight, all right? So if we increase cost on us, it's going to be passed along. And as to the costs, I'm going to give you a couple of simple things, and these two items alone make it cost prohibitive for us to move forward. One is the fact that the truck itself, a diesel truck today, is $150,000. An electric truck is from $300,000 to $500,000. Every one of those trucks would need its own charging station, which is $150,000 a piece. So it's just, from a cost perspective, doesn't make any sense for us to go this direction. The other piece that's been talked about is the range, okay? A range of an electric truck today, about 300 miles. The battery that sits on it takes away 10% less of a load. It goes 300 miles, it has to sit and charge for 8 to 10 hours. A diesel truck today can fill up and drive all the way to Miami, 1,400 miles, fill up and drive back, okay? So from a practical standpoint, when you hear there is no plan, there's no plan because it doesn't work. It just doesn't fit what we're trying to do. There's been discussions about hydrogen. I do believe for trucks, that's the answer in the future, not batteries. So why would we push batteries onto trucks today? There's a number of safety issues. We haven't talked about those. It takes, to put on an electric battery, a car battery at Stanford recently, it took about 45 minutes to put it out, 24,000 gallons of water, okay? For just a simple combustion car, it takes 800 gallons of water in 15 minutes to put out. So there is a myriad of issues of why this doesn't work. I agree with all the political issues with regards to the lack of representation on this issue. I can't go and lobby somebody out in Sacramento. I can't go out and talk to a legislator about that. I have a 14-member committee that I barely can talk to here at the state of Connecticut to get this done. So I implore you to push back on these and do not let these go forward. It's simply too much, too fast for our industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And also, I'd like to recognize other associations and organizations that are with us this morning, although not going to speak. They include the CBIA, SEMA, the NFIB, the Yankee Institute, the Connecticut Beer Wholesalers, the Gasoline and Automotive Dealer Association, Connecticut Energy Marketers Association, the Connecticut Building Trades, and Post Road Stages. In addition to, obviously, the members of both the Republican Senate and House Republican caucuses who are standing with us here this morning. So with that, we'll open it up for questions.
So, even if Connecticut does not go this way, the manufacturers, GM and others, have said they're going for 2035, that they are committed to making this transition. So I want to ask you about the electric piece. Your members on the Energy and Technology Committee have been supportive of Pura's leadership, which has been very aggressive in dealing with the utilities as far as capital expenditures and whatnot. So do you think that that's a mistake, that this General Assembly should be pushing PURA to be a little bit more liberal on, go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, it's not correct. We were not supportive of PURA. Many of our membership and our leadership on the Environment and the Energy Committee, my ranking member on energy spoke against it and voted against it. So we weren't supportive, but I think I could say universally, even for the members that voted for that bill, don't think anyone envisioned that PURA would actually come forward after these regs are being pushed to deny reimbursement for our utility companies to build charging stations. And so regardless of how people voted on the bill, I have asked that question of the commissioner. How do you reconcile the policy that your agency has created in that you're not going to reimburse the utility companies for building out the grid for electric vehicles, but you're going to mandate electric vehicles? I am awaiting an answer on that.
When you say commissioner, are you talking about Commissioner Dykes or Commissioner Gillette?
Commissioner Dykes, I mean, she oversees PURA as well. It's under her agency.
You guys,
Which is a whole other problem.
you keep mentioning these unelected bureaucrats making the decision. Well, this was an act of the legislature. You guys empower state agencies to adopt regulations. Every Republican but one voted against this legislation in 2022. So, I mean, hasn't it followed the process? And I mean, I don't, I hear this a lot from you guys, but this was something that in 2004, all but one Republican supported going with the light duty standards. You can shake your head, but those are the numbers.
Well, 2004. Let's go to 2000. Republican governor, Republicans supported low-emission vehicles, which are your gas-powered cars. That's what the law was about. Okay, what's happening now and what is fundamentally different was that the intent of that law was to reduce emissions with low-emission vehicles, not zero. And in fact, Democrats on the floor during debate promised that they would never make people buy any type of car other than the one that they choose. Okay, they even specifically at the time, the choice was a gas-powered car or a hybrid. They pointed to a hybrid, a Prius, in fact, and said we would never make people of Connecticut be forced into buying a hybrid. So the EV wasn't even discussed. It wasn't part of the conversation. But the 2004 law was about lower emission vehicles, which included gas-powered cars. That was the intent of that statute, which we stand by. What has substantially changed is that California, by executive order of their government, their governor, not their legislature, just like we're not trying to do it here, is that they're trying to circumvent the will of the people and their representatives. We need to make this choice. Put it before the General Assembly. What are they afraid of?
So
They voted to authorize the adoption of these regulations.
Not these regulations. That's why they're coming before the Regulation Review Committee to see whether or not they comply with the intent of that 2004 statute. And if you go to the legislative, that's regarding trucks.
Paul, regardless of what was done in the past, the Regulations Review Committee has the ability under statute to send this to the legislature. There is a mechanism in place under law. We are asking this Regulations Review Committee to invoke that ability and send these regulations to the General Assembly. That's all we're asking today. Let's have that debate next session.
The 2004 law did say the commissioner can offer regulations to basically update things as California updates theirs. So are you really want to hang this on a legal sufficiency argument, or are you saying this is such a major public policy change that even if it, as the Attorney General said, these regs meet the sufficiency standard, that they are in keeping with the intent of the General Assembly going back to the 2004 law that dealt with the car emissions. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what is your argument here? Is your argument that This is such a public policy change that it should be debated by the full General Assembly regardless of what was passed in 2004, and does it meet the legal standard too?
I think it's both. Okay, first, on its face, I don't believe, or I do believe, the 2004 statute is ambiguous. And if you go to the legislative history and it was actually debated, the intent is clear. Connecticut was going to have low emission vehicles, and that they were not going to ever tell people what car they could and could not buy. In other words, people would retain their choice. As to the substantial issue that's before us, I think yes. I think the issue that's coming out of California was decided by a governor. Their legislature didn't have the opportunity to weigh in. And the people of Connecticut should have the choice and have their representatives take the stand and vote yes or no whether or not this is a good policy for Connecticut. Again, that's an unelected board. We don't have representatives in Sacramento. We do have them in Washington. Again, getting back to, we want clean air. We want a goal. But a goal that's achievable is a lot different than a promise that is not.
2035 is 12 years away, and we all know how our phones have improved in the last 12 years. Are you factoring in, over the next 12 years, potential change in the costs, more charging stations, more everything? A lot can happen in 12 years.
That's not the standard we should be applying. This is going to affect every resident, every business throughout the entire state of Connecticut. And in reference to New Britain and DATCO building out that infrastructure, my understanding is that it's going to take Eversource, if they put the shovel in the ground today, 8 years just to improve the grid in New Britain for those buses. So while we could say it's 12 years off, 12 years goes pretty quick when you need to invest $2.5 billion in an infrastructure. I mean, look at how long the tree removal is taking for the storm responses throughout the state of Connecticut. So for us, we believe this is the most irresponsible, nonsensical thing that we are doing to the residents of Connecticut today with this legislation. And to the point about whether or not there's legal sufficiency and the commissioner has the ability to do it versus the legislature can use discretion on the Regs Review Committee. In either situation, we believe statutorily they can make that determination. But what I'm not going to accept is Democrats on that committee to say we have no other choice. We are required to vote yes. We are saying today there are options by statute. You could reject and send it to the assembly, or you could approve it. But don't punt it and take a cop-out that you have to vote yes because of some weird procedure. Tell that to the people that can't afford these mandates when they come down 12 years from now.
Right now, I don't count a majority on that committee to adopt these regulations. Senator Kelly, you're a member of the committee. What is your count?
Well, I believe the count, you'll see it in a week or two. I think it's close. I think, what we're trying to do is educate Connecticut on what the real facts here are, and to make sure that everyone on reg review makes an informed decision based on the facts and what's before them. There's information that the department should have included, the fiscal note, where's the revenue loss going to come up, and they just blew by that. That was something that was put in the record. I made sure that information was in the record, that they had that before, and yet they just blew through it and didn't care to comment on where the loss of about $600 million worth of revenue, if we move to an all-electric vehicle environment, is going to come from. And so they didn't do their job either. So we'll see what happens. We're trying to educate, once again, not only the committee, but also the state of Connecticut on what this is actually going to mean.
If these regs fail at the end of the month, what should the General Assembly be doing in the next session to deal with how Connecticut gets to a point in 2035 where it can handle, the trucks are, it's a more complicated and perhaps separate issue. But the industry seems quite clear of where they're going on cars, that they are talking about ceasing to sell gas-powered cars in 2035.
The newspapers I'm reading don't quite say that. I know they've said it before. That is softening. If you've read more recently, certainly it may be a stated goal, but it certainly is softening as more and more reports are coming out on as to where the marketplace is. And so I think you're seeing an adjustment in Detroit as to where that's going. Also keep in mind that Detroit is talking and taking positions while they're also having issues with their labor. And Detroit would like to move. So there's other issues at play here other than just electric vehicles. And so I think we need to be mindful of the environment in which that is occurring. But what I read in the news, which is all right there, would lead one to believe that auto manufacturers are softening on their initial goals with regards to what they can produce.
And we believe in free market. Let the manufacturers figure out how soon, how quickly, how viable they can do this. If you talk to GM, yes, certainly they are producing these electric vehicles. But there are some lines like Jeep that aren't there. They don't have that technology yet. So in addition, there are going to be winners and losers for car manufacturers. If you work for Jeep and these regulations pass, oh well, you may be out of a job. If you work for Nissan, I think they might be further along. So, there's a lot of complexity to that, but we just say, let the market start working. They're still trying to figure it out. Why the heck is government stepping in and imposing all these artificial mandates for very little return on emissions in the state of Connecticut?
Well, one of the arguments is that giving a certain amount of reliability to the industry, right? Setting a direction, and it's sort of there's a relationship there, the back and forth about.
I think they're naturally doing that. I think one of, the commissioner's response to me when I was concerned about this timeline is, well, we could just adjust it and repeal the timeline. I think government is the last entity, especially in the state of Connecticut, that provides certainty to any business. Just ask them. Do they feel comfortable running their businesses in the state of Connecticut? Surprise, we may have predictive scheduling next year for everybody. So I don't think businesses rely on what government has to say. I think they work around government, despite government. And yes, electric vehicles are moving forward, and they will continue to. We are not saying put a halt to it, but let the market work itself out. Let the market figure out how we're going to get coach buses to work where you could actually put your luggage in it when you travel. Every time you have this conversation with people, you hear more and more amazing stories that you didn't think of. And I would also just say to the Democrats on the Reg Review Committee, come out and state your position on how you're going to vote, and then listen to what people have to say in response to how you're going to vote. Because I suspect a yes vote is going to have a very interesting public response. When our members came out and said they were voting no, they could tell you the response was not that bad from people.
Sorry. Can I just put, sorry. Hi, Rep. Holly Cheeseman. I think we want to let the market decide. I was at a conference recently, and one of the speakers presented two pictures. One was in New York, the Easter Parade in 1900, all horse-drawn carriages. Fast forward to 1913, every vehicle in that parade was a Model T Ford. We didn't tell everyone, go out and kill your horse. We let the market decide. The biggest problem facing those towns, what are we going to do with all the horse manure, which may be the problem in this building. But fast forward 13 years, the market decided, technology decided. We may see vast technological breakthroughs, but we don't know. Much less than that blacksmith in 1900 knew that he was going to be out of a job. Thank you.
Cheeseman reminds me of this. the killing the horses. There's nothing in these regs that would make people get rid of their 5-year-old car that older couple of years, right? I mean, we can keep these cars.
No, that's right. But again, I mean, we're talking about, mainly what we're hearing about other areas of the market. But that is correct. People would have to phase out their vehicles. They don't have to get rid of them in 2035.
What would the change to federal emission standards mean for air quality in Connecticut? Do you think it would be the same as today? Do you think it would be better? Do you think it would be worse?
Well,
I know you guys don't like the California standards, but I mean...
The one benefit with the federal standards that they're still evolving with is that there are 32 states.
32.
So you're dealing with the collective mass majority of our states. I think we're better off following that when you're dealing with something that's so impactful to the economy that we would follow the rest of those states, especially when our pollution, as we know, is coming from places like Ohio and Pennsylvania that aren't following the EPA.
You know, and DEP's own statements, which is that board over there, shows that 90% in Fairfield County and 80% throughout the rest of the state of Connecticut of our air pollution comes from jurisdictions beyond Connecticut's control. So cleaning our air, we have a very limited capability to do that. And quite frankly, from my perspective, a state-by-state patchwork quilt of dealing with, air quality is really not the best approach. You need a national approach and an international approach. That's really what you need to have. Instead, what we have is state by state. We're trying to do it, but if states to our west don't also, what happens?
Well, it's not state by state. There are two standards, and the law is changed. You can do this or you can do that. You're not suggesting that a 10% reduction would be insignificant to people's health on the ground, particularly in the summer in some of these states, in some of these urban areas.
No, I'm saying that we need to make sure that the air quality in Connecticut is enhanced and improved. Okay, but you take, for instance, just the plan before us that the administration wants to do, the question on public housing, senior housing, cities. What's going to happen there? What happens if I'm in a 4-family house with no on-site parking? It's on the street. Who's going to provide that charging station? In fact, in one of the responses with regards to the charging of cars during the winter, which obviously we have here in the state of Connecticut when the temperatures decline, well, it takes longer and the batteries, I'm going to say, expend themselves quicker. And one of the responses was to charge your car in a climate-controlled garage. Well, the environmental justice communities are the ones that have the exacerbated health problems. That is where we should be focusing on how do we make sure that our cities and the transportation systems around the cities are constructed and dealt with. And so there's no plan. And yet that would fall, what I believe, in the 10% in improving air quality. And we need to make that a priority. This administration isn't doing it. It's not in the EV ban policy. And as a matter of fact, the responses from DEP are lackluster at best.
Everything you guys mentioned, there's a cost, right? And you took issue with the idea that this is inevitable in 2035, which is a fair point. It may or may not happen. But what appears to be clear, there is a trend in this direction. The number of EV sales has doubled in the past 2 years. It's still only like 7%, but there seems to be a trend. So, is there any policy initiative that you can foresee putting forward that may indeed require the expenditure of funds, whether it's beefing up the infrastructure or whatnot? I mean, this is, however it happens, there's going to be cost and quite frankly, significant cost, correct?
Sure, and I know in the Senate, I'll give Representative, I almost promoted you there, Representative Candelora handle from the House. I know we've given the majority an opportunity. We called it a better way to an accountable Connecticut to utilize the federal infrastructure dollars to make sure that as we built out our transportation system and the investment in our economy, that we also did it in a green way that also ensured that we used Connecticut labor to do that. And to make sure that these projects not only were awarded, but that they actually stayed on schedule to happen, to actually become reality. This is a problem with the majority. They make a lot of promises on a lot of different areas. Transportation's yet another one. And yet, we're not getting those in. And what I'm seeing in the press is that we've missed a couple of opportunities already where we could have used those funds, invested it into our transportation, our economy, and improve the air quality around these environmental justice communities. But the majority rejected that.
And the Bond Commission met in September and commissioned a study to begin building out the infrastructure for an electric fleet for Connecticut. Our Republican members voted for that study. So, I mean, we clearly were supporting these initiatives, but that's the way we want to do it, is let's put the study first, get those results, and then move forward, incrementally. This is crazy. This is a ban with absolutely no plan.
But that law has already committed the state to electrify its fleet.
Yeah, it had,
and
but
yeah. It's going forward. It's not a study to decide whether or not.
It's an infrastructure plan, is what I said, and that was my point, is Republicans are supportive of spending that money to implement. That's not the issue.
Well, I mean,
it's all tax dollars.
Air quality, environmental communities, and justice communities. How is that air quality going to be any better or improved if you switch from stricter emission standards to less, or what are viewed as perhaps less stricter emission standards, federal standards? I mean, how do you protect the air quality of the environmental justice communities?
Okay, so two ways. One is that's a perspective. Okay, I think you're still moving toward the goal. And I think the real difference is whose goal is achievable and whose goal isn't. Even if it's less, as the perspective is it might be less strict. If it's achievable, getting an 80 may not be as good as getting a 90, but it's better than getting a 0. And what you have before us is something that's not achievable. We see what's going on is they're looking at it from one perspective, that they want to ban a car, and they're looking at only transportation, and that's what they're going for, but yet our infrastructure, our grid, our capability to deliver that is not in place. And they can't point to anything in their plan or proposal that will say, if you do this, in 2035, we will be there. Everything else will catch up. And 10 years ago, they promised affordable health care. And where are we today? Did anybody's premium go down? Has anybody's health care gotten less expensive? Has access improved? Quality enhanced? Answers no, no, and no. Okay, and what they're doing? They're standing in the way of initiatives that we put forward that would allow small group to association plans to come together to reduce that, and even reinsurance, which would reduce premiums by 30%. They stand in the way of progress. So here, you got to take it on faith. Well, their faith has no plan, and they can't point to, well, we'll have stricter standards and better air quality if in 10 years we're at 0. At least our ideas have a plan and are more achievable.
Is this the guts of the 2024 re-election effort by the Republican caucuses?
I think it's common sense we're bringing to the equation. And, I think that's what Connecticut sorely lacks.
Yeah, and I mean, just to that response, this issue we're very passionate about and we do believe in. To suggest that this is just politics isn't fair to the minority party.
I'm suggesting it's just politics. I'm asking how powerful, how good a political...
Well, I think that people are moved by this issue. So what happens a year from now, I don't know. It's going to depend on how these roll out. But it's certainly it's going to be an issue that continues to be on people's minds. But This is not about the introduction of a 2024 campaign. This is about protecting the residents of Connecticut and providing them choice.
Okay, thank you very much.